right, welcome to Plug and Pay, which is a talk show where we sit down with payroll professionals from all around the world to talk about interesting topics that are shaping the global payroll space. My name is Mark Oliver Fiedler. I'm the founder and CEO of Payzaar, and I'm the host of the show. We release new episodes every month, and you can find them on our YouTube channel, on our LinkedIn page, or on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. So if you like the content, by the way, make sure you click a like or leave a comment, and definitely make sure you subscribe so you can make sure you get all the future episodes, and we spread the word and create more awareness about all the great interviews and the great discussions that we're having here. So talking about that, for today's episode, I'm very excited to welcome to the program Steve Batten. Steve is a digital HR transformation lead at EY. And Steve, great to have you on the program. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so to get us started, maybe tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I'm currently working with EY in the people advisory services, and it's pretty much a consultancy that's working with HR transformations, and I predominantly work within the payroll section of that, and typically what I do is work with organizations to kind of unlock the potential of their payroll teams by looking at their people footprint, how their processes are working, system integrations, vendor challenges that they might have with their vendors to look at consolidation. So the full end-to-end like holistic view of how their payroll process is operating. So a little bit about my background. I guess payroller, didn't choose it as part of my studies, as I think most people say, but I guess I fell into it by taking a job straight from university. I was interested in working in computers, and I worked for Chesington Computer Centre, which just happened to be the government payroll provider, if you like. It was their it worked with the Treasury at doing large government payrolls, and they privatized and ADP acquired them a few years down the line. So public sector background. One of the things that quite quickly learn about payroll is the opportunities, right? So there's a good opportunity to learn a vocation, I would say, and really I grew my career straight from payroll administrator, payroll supervisor, payroll manager, moved across to implementation. So quite a common story. Very fortunate to have been a big organization that had lots of opportunities. So I moved business side, where I was responsible for business process improvement. I did some offshoring, spent some time overseas, setting up teams that were churning out implementations and managing payrolls. So a really good high scale volume of payroll processing. One of the other things that really I think enlightened me was we rolled out NPS as a mechanism for capturing customer feedback, and I think the insights that I got during that time, what the expectations were of payroll professionals, what the companies were looking for when they were moving payroll systems, not necessarily the grand transformation things that we work on at the moment, but it really gave me an insight into what the drivers or the motivators are, and really the expectations from a decent payroll system. So from there I left ADP and then moved across to a couple of startups, but always my calling was always back to payroll. So it's in my DNA really from my early career, but and actually all the insights I learned. So here I am now, advising organizations on the best course of action, or even just how to make small incremental changes that that can be sometimes transformational. So that's me and my payroll career.
Fantastic, very, very impressive background, and given all the experience you've gathered over the years working with many different organizations, as you mentioned, large and small, and helping them through transformations and process improvements, I'm curious, in your experience, what typically drives an organization to embark on such a journey? What motivates them to undergo a transformation in their payroll?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a number of things. I'd like to break it down probably into some buckets. One that tends to be the first thing that shines a light on payroll is the quality, right? If there's issues with payroll, it doesn't take long for the noise to escalate up within the organization. So, quality and persistent issues is something that you're always going to be looking at. I guess when you get to a certain point of persistent issues, and I'll talk about risks as the next bucket. But then these are the sort of things that would draw attention to the payroll organization, or the payroll teams within the organization. The next part is really around risk and risk mitigation. I think that there's the license to operate in the first place, that making sure that you're compliant and you're running you're running within the legislative, whichever country you're in, highly regulated. Then there's always the resilience and the continuity that keeps people up at night. I would say, you don't want to be the chief people officer that has to tell their organization that they haven't made a payment. And I think, coming through, some of the situations we've just been through, with COVID, and some of the the forced transformational activity that we had to do. I mean, this is big on people's lists now. In addition to that, there's the legacy platforms, dated integrations that people have built themselves, that sit outside of payroll, or the HR systems that are just middleware that are just running and churning these store procedures, often supported by people that are no longer in that were written by people that are no longer in the organization but are still being supported. So that's one other thing. And then I think the last thing around the risk is the talent. People are struggling to get good people, and when they do, it's struggling to keep them. So again, I think that's that risk bucket that I think gets into people's minds. The next part is around innovation. Payroll has undoubtedly got some strong opportunities to really use the insights, and I think what we're starting to hear now is what's next for payroll. How can we really utilize the data? The irony is, whenever we do some assessments with big organizations, and then we're looking at the cost to serve, and then we're trying to gather the information, and then someone has to go to finance to ask how much people are being paid, and it's just so ironic that we've got all the data in our hands within the payroll organization that we have to go and ask for other stakeholders to provide the information. So again, I think people are starting to think about unlocking the potential of their payroll data, right? And then there's also things like moving with simplification of employee experience. So again, that innovation side, people looking at the employee value proposition and thinking, pay, it's a big motivator. It's a must-have, it's a hygiene factor. Let's see how we can make it easy for people to access their data. And we talk about on demand, and some of these opportunities, to be giving people the power to take their money earlier. There's that part, but then there's also, if I've got an issue with my pay, or if I've got an issue with a tax return, do I really get the right support that I need from the organization? So again, that quick resolution and access to expertise, I think, is another driver why people want to kind of close the loop and say, actually, now it's time that we need to invest to modernize our payroll department. And I think that probably is the motivation now, to at least get the mandate out there to the payroll manager to say, isn't it time we looked at our, how we're stacking up. So yeah, they would be the sort of the things I would say are the most common at the moment.
It's quite interesting if I kind of go through those 4 different items. The first 2, things are, do you have real issues, real problems, or you sort of anticipate risk? They're quite defensive, right, in a way. And the other 2, innovation and employee experience, are more sort of, you're trying to get ahead of, you're trying to be on the front foot. So it's quite interesting how it can be either a more defensive situation, you need to fix something, or make sure that you mitigate some potential exposure and risk, or you're trying to get ahead of it with the data, with the employee experience.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think anybody that ventures into this area, it's quite a bold move, right? Because pay people get paid. People get paid 9 times out of 10 accurately. So it's quite often it's let's not disrupt something that's going well. So it does take a bolder person or somebody that is very a big change advocate really to
Yeah,
then make the transition into not just seeing what the opportunities are, but then making the investment into that.
yeah. I want to pick up on that point about the data. I'm a big believer in this. I'm an engineer by background. I love data and analytics and spreadsheets and all that kind of good stuff. And I'm curious, in your experience, the value of the data that payroll sits on and doing something with the data, creating more insights, when that has come up in client projects that you've worked on or looked at, does that typically get pushed more from the payroll team itself, comes out of the payroll and the payroll leadership, or is it the finance organization that says, listen, we need better data from you guys, or is it the HR organization? Because this,
Yeah, and I think that opens up a debate that you've probably had many times, and it's around where does payroll sit, right? Because all the inputs generally and the data that powers the payroll, 9 times out of 10 it comes from HR, right? So or it might be the reward team that do the benefits, but then and payroll become the custodian for a bit, do a bit of work, and then they farm it out to the finance team, who will always then pick up the phone and say, I just want to check that this is right. Is this the right cost center? And so I think it's a really good point. I think a lot of the some of the HR leaders that I'm speaking to now have probably understood that there's a bit more information they can get, around trending, about not just on tenure, but then how quickly that the pay is telling a story about their value proposition again, the retention side. Whereas on the finance side, it's more about how much are we spending. Yeah, what's not outside of budget. It's more those sort of fluctuations. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, whether or not businesses are mature enough to leverage it, and actually there's a big job to do from a building blocks perspective before they can start to get comparing apples with apples. I mean, a lot of the organizations that we're working with, rapid growth, lots of acquisition, they're on 50, 60 different vendors. So, or they've got different relationships, or, they've got the same vendor, but they've got 4 or 5 different business processes because they're working in different relationships. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing now is almost like, let's get back to square one. Let's reset what the vision is going to be from the business process. Let's understand our integrations and our touch points. And then we can start to build on, whether they've got a data lake solution, which is being driven from the technology side, or whether or not it's, it's finance and, simple things like, 100% accuracy on a GL. These are kind of the problem statements that we're getting. And it's I guess that's the reality of where the payroll teams are, as opposed to it being, as you just said, sort of defense versus forward thinking. Let's leverage whatever, all of the information we've got, which is massive opportunity, so.
Yeah. All right. So we talked about some of the triggers for transformation, what motivates an organization to, go on that journey, which we know it's not trivial. So let's say, I'm the payroll leader. I'm convinced I got to do something. How do I convince the rest of the organization? Because obviously it's not just the payroll team. You need support. You need buy-in. You need to get budget, whatever. So how do I get that sort of support from the rest of the organization for whatever?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think saying that you want to improve your payroll function, add resilience, build continuity, all of those types of things, add automation, save costs. They're all stories that everyone's going to say brilliant. It's expensive. So, changing your payroll provider just on its own is expensive, but then the investment around, business process reengineering, all of those other things become expensive. But one of the other biggest challenges, I think, I don't know if it's necessarily a challenge, but one of the things that you need to consider is if you look at the persona of a payroll professional, right? Busy person, they're very busy, working peaks. When they're not processing payrolls, they're answering the inquiries that they get through the other couple of weeks. Very proud of their processes. They're problem solvers. They like to, take pride in that they can fix a problem when they get a call from, they kind of understand the people within their organization. So I think change for them is almost, so it's quite daunting, right? So I would say you'd need to be able to get their buy-in because it's going to be change for the better, and it's not going to be disrupting what they like doing. I mean, I used to like running payrolls because I knew where I was every month, and I knew that what I had to do and why when I had to do it. Those are the sort of things that the persona of a payroller, really enjoys. So, I think the first steps in really getting buy-in from the organization would be to then, influence the team around you that, manual working isn't safe. It's not, lots of data flying around. You're transposing information. I mean, we didn't even mention, about some of the motivations to mandate the change, about the risk to the data that is now, that could be interpreted or moved around, especially when it's starting to talk about, AI and, chatbots, interpreting information and being, not even knowing what they can share and they can't share. That bit kind of freaks me out a little bit in terms of, how wide it could go. But, I've worked within some teams where they're happy receiving paper and they're happy knowing that they check the paper. And so I guess that's the part I'm trying to get to is, it's a change. It's a change for a lot of payroll teams, and then using them as your change allies to then talk to management to say, do you know what? I really believe in this vision that, we can build an integration, and I won't need to key these new starters every day, and I won't need to do this, and I can keep the payroll window open longer, and it's going to give me more opportunity to do some more value add stuff for the organization. And I think that goes a long way. There's a lot of skip level happening now. There's, people talk a little bit more about, these types of new innovation. And I think if you can get your payroll team on board, small incremental changes, then I think that starts to influence that actually it's going to be a good idea. It's not so bold looking at a different, integration model or looking at a different way of processing your payroll. And I think once you start to get, more of a bottom up approach, it helps with the, I need to go and sell this into the organization now because now's the time to, to start to look at, refreshing or modernizing our payroll. We're not going to have to do it again let's hope we're not going to have to do it again for another, 20 years or whatever I plucked a number out there. But ultimately, I think some of the challenge with change comes from, just the fact that payroll is they like doing what they like doing. And quite often, and you've probably seen this yourself, quite often there'll be organizational wide initiatives, and quite often payroll gets called out of scope quite quickly because one, they don't have the capacity or headspace to be able to invest into the change, but two, it's almost like, well, actually, if we break it, it's probably more damaging than the output.
Right. Yeah. I think that is one of the underlying intrinsic challenges of payroll, is because, as we said at the beginning, you got to get it right 100% of the time. So you can't, unlike in, not that other functions, should get away with making mistakes, but I suppose the stakes are maybe not quite as high, or the risks are, more readily tolerated, that you try something and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. If I think of totally different from about sales, right? Hey, there's a new tool or a new methodology. Let's just try it out, see what happens next quarter, right? in payroll, you just can't quite work like that, right? You can't just say, let's try it out, see what happens. You gotta convince yourself. You gotta do a lot of checking and before you ultimately decide that we're ready to jump into the pool and get going with a new methodology or a new process or whatever it is. But it's interesting to hear you describe kind of if I'm in the position of payroll leader, first I need to kind of get the troops, right? My payroll team rallied behind the idea of change, which might be uncomfortable and scary, and you got to get people on board with the vision of how is this going to improve all of our collective lives, and then you can take it up to the senior management.
Definitely would be the approach. And I've worked with payroll managers on specifically helping them with some of those, and then it almost becomes a change management exercise.
So, for sure.
And then I guess the second part, of the getting the buy-in from management. As I said earlier, I mean, it's expensive to change. A lot of fragmented payroll setups. There is opportunity to improve costs, and so it's not necessarily as a black or white as a business case in front of someone saying, "Oh, I'm going to get a benefit here." That's not to say it doesn't exist in terms of when you bring in automation, but then you're talking about a bigger people element to the change. I wish it was as easy. We spend a lot of time talking about the leakage of poor payroll processing. So when we say about leakage, we mean the financial waste within your business process, mainly downstream. You mentioned earlier about bad data in, bad data out, and when you're looking at the transformational change, it's really important to look at that end to end. Where's the data? A lot of the root causes are going to be outside of payroll, but you payroll professional being proud about how they do it. They know where to look. They know how to spot some of these these exceptions that come through. But again, it's all rework and all waste. It's all inefficiencies that really difficult. We all know they're there, but it's really difficult to then pinpoint and then get a tangible view of where that benefit will sit. So working with some of the organizations I've worked with, that so what, or it's going to cost us, there's no return of investment for a few years. Those are all real conversations I had, and fortunately, I think as I said, I think people are starting to realize now's the time to really build some robustness around your payroll function.
But it also has, we had actually a webinar yesterday talking about the cost of change and transformation, and in a way it also has to do with just the way that global payroll solutions have been architected in a way, or I guess how they function traditionally, right? Means that if I want to make a change, I have some process challenges, or I have a certain part of my organizational landscape where the payroll is just not working as well as I'd like it to be. It basically means I have to make a pretty significant wholesale change, right? Especially if I'm now currently working with a global vendor and things are not running as smoothly as I like. I have to basically change everything, right? I have to take that whole global vendor out. I have to put new local payroll solutions in place. So it's daunting, right? To go, this is going to keep us busy for the next 2-3 years, just going through this kind of change, and who knows whether we're going to come out on the other side in any better shape than we were. And sometimes it ends up being better. Maybe in this part or this process works better, but then other things don't work as well. And that's where I think from a Payzaar perspective, we obviously have we're coming at this from a very specific point of view, or from a different angle, where more targeted. We call it surgical change, where you go in and say, let's really understand what your specific pain points are, where the specific issues are. Let's not try to change everything at the same time, right? But let's introduce change maybe only in the reporting environment, right? In the reporting process, which means you don't have to rip apart the entire global payroll ecosystem infrastructure, right? You might not, need to change your vendors at all. It's just, you need to take a look at where can I insert maybe smart tools, technology to overcome some of these specific challenges. And that hopefully, from a transformation and buy-in and, getting over the hump, right? And getting people convinced to let's do it makes it easier for people to get behind this as well. Yeah. Now talking about global payroll transformation, however you do it, not being easy. I'm curious if what you see. What are some of the common pitfalls that organizations run into when they are trying to, transform and optimize and make change to the payroll?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest, I would say the biggest thing that's always underestimated is the effort to change. And I think the vendors, and if we're talking about specifically about the vendor change or the system change, the vendor has different motivations than perhaps the payroll team might have. They want to move as fast as they can. They want to get you on board, so they want to start to be able to to get the revenue from the pay slips. So quite often the project plan or the timing involved will have some really steep and some aggressive timelines to hit. And when you think about, if you want it to be truly transformational, you don't really want to be lifting and shifting. You probably want to do some you want wage type harmonization. You want to look at, really push the envelope on the integration to try and get as much as you can. I mean, there's challenges with every field, but if there is opportunity and integration is part of the scope, then I guess the effort involved and the stakeholders that you need to be involved. Yeah, I think where I was going with this is it's often underestimated how much effort is involved. And then once you do start to understand, the interfacing factors of just your payroll process, then you start to get scope. The scope creep comes in. The reward and recognition team get wind of that you're going to be changing the provider, so they've got an opportunity to change how you report to them. But then at the same time, they want to then introduce a way of sharing the data from the benefits administrator, for example, or then somebody mentions about how to record absence, and then there's you find out that you've got the punching machines in five of your markets, that then you think, oh gosh, now I need to add additional time for that. So I think in terms of, and I would say about the pitfalls, it's planning. I mean, it goes without saying that you've got strong planning involved in terms of making sure you've got the right time allotted for each of the phases, whether or not it's your blueprint phase or your build and test phase, and you making sure you've got all the things in place. But I would say before that, make sure that you've got a really good understanding of your business process. How input flows between each system. I'm not saying you have to go down to the real granular level, but 80% of the time you probably want to be able to do the same thing in the same order with the same stage gates. So investing that time up front to do the process reengineering. I'm a bit of a process head myself. I quite enjoy it. I like to sit down and root cause analysis some persistent issues. But generally I would always start with the process and then lead on, and then that forms a really nice requirement document for how you work with your payroll system and your payroll vendor. I think quite often we see we get asked the question, how is my payroll team performing, and we don't track the stuff that's outside of pretty much when's the due date for submission. It's from then. So all of that time leading up to the submission date very rarely tracked, right? So you try and get some analytics. How much capacity do I need? I've no idea, because we don't know how much data is being transferred manually. We don't know how many email boxes you've mounted. So there's all of those types of things that just goes unnoticed in terms of what the payroller is doing, especially when you get someone who doesn't really know the payroll domain, and they're assuming that all you're doing is you're working between, the cutoff on the 8th to the processing date on the 18th, and you're busy for a week, and then the rest of the time you're quiet. Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm not sure I answered the question, but certainly the pitfalls that I would see is at the start of the kickoff with the vendor. It's almost that's not the kickoff. The kickoff should already be way down the line in terms of your business process. This is actually what I'm after, payroll provider, and can we work on those solutions? And I want to pay a fair amount for it. I don't want to be charged a premium just because I've got a different integration. So there's those types of conversations, and I don't want to go off on a rabbit hole because
no, but that actually brings up kind of an for me interesting maybe follow-up question to that is in your experience in these large transformations. I mean, you're obviously working as a transformation expert for a consulting organization, but so you're being brought in to kind of bring outside experience and knowledge into that process. Do you think we actually had that question come up in the webinar yesterday? Someone asked, do you feel that when you're going through a transformation process that can be managed by the payroll team or the HR team in-house, or is it almost invariably you need someone to come in from the outside, whether it's based on their experience, based on being more objective and not being sort of part of the interested parties that maybe have vested stakes in the project.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what tend to be seeing now, and certainly where I'm seeing it work really well, is the appointment of like a global process owner for payroll. So really then start somebody who's not really operational, who is able to then own the process and the governance, and making sure the InfoSec processes are aligned, and making sure that the right stage gates are included, and looking at it holistically, driving then at a company level, the initiatives that can help with the transformations. I think where I've seen it, where certainly from an acquisitions perspective, when there's a traditional payroll team and a payroll manager, and you acquire someone, and all of a sudden, then, oh yeah, we've just acquired and we've got 13 people in France. How are you going to manage it? And you're like, well, what do they do at the moment? Well, they're only a startup. They use their accountancy firm, and then all of a sudden you're shoehorning all of these processes in. I think a payroll manager does get overwhelmed, and they'll do everything they can to pay, and you know what? They'll probably get it over the line, but then actually there needs to be better mechanism for bringing that payroll on board. We talked about some of the POE things earlier, and TS, the transition services agreements, and all of these other things that are at play. And back to the payroll manager, who's probably keen to evolve and learn and develop, and enjoying all the opportunities to learn new skills, but at the same time, they've got their day jobs going on. So going back to the point, I think global process owner seems to be quite a common move now for payroll, and could then start to drive some of the initiatives. Solid engagement with the regional payroll managers, making sure that they've got more than involvement in decision makers, but I think they're the ones that are the custodian of the strategy, if you like. And of course, bringing in the expertise for short periods of time is would be again the most cost effective way to achieve that.
So two important factors that almost invariably come up when we talk with clients about their transformation projects is the question of time to value. How quickly can I start to reap the benefits of going through the transformation, and of course risk mitigation, right, which you already touched on. But I'm curious, in your experience between these two important factors, what are some of the things that can be done, or best practices to try to minimize time to value or optimize time to
Yeah,
value? And
yeah. Um, Again, I mean, it's kind of a case. I mean, there's lots of variables involved. I think what's always looking to do in terms of transformation is look for some quick opportunities and quick wins and to execute on those. I can draw back to an example where um, organization was very, very paper orientated. In fact, you'd go into the office and there'll be piles of paper on the desk and it'll be all, PPI, PII. It would be, very sensitive and it's just on the desk. But the grander picture was to build some integrations, and whether or not it was just a report that we were running to be able to then distribute to, to the payroll vendors. But they're the small kind of incremental quick wins that you could probably put in that would then get your payroll team on side. I don't want to reiterate what I said earlier, but the vendor's going to be rushing you to get you onto their platform as quickly as possible. You might have some benefits there from you're moving to a global relationship with a vendor. You're going to be able to negotiate the payslip price down a bit better, so get some hard savings from that. Employees, some of the other quick wins around, getting the pay slips into the HR information system that they use. So they're only a couple of clicks away and they've only got one log on. It's all mobile enabled. Those are sort of things that actually can become quite strong benefits to use then to say, I want to do a bit more, and I think, at the end of the day, the employee is the customer. So, you can get some of those things available to them. Think about some of the other things that would really impact the employee and make their life easier. If you think about some, ticketing systems that we use now for employees to raise queries. If we have more of a payroll focused service that click on and it's asking you the questions you need. It allows you to, if you haven't been paid that morning and you need to get hold of someone, sometimes it's difficult, right? You have to go through a triage process. In a lot of organizations now, they've got one big service delivery teams that are managing employee queries. Then we can build up some services that I haven't been paid, so therefore I've got a priority one ticket that goes straight to the person who knows how to fix it straight away. These are all sort of things that we have part of your you're going to transform your payroll function. These are the sort of things that we put in place and would be considered to be quick wins for those values. Outside of the business case, which, as I mentioned, is quite often difficult to tally up. But then secondly, with scope creep and things that tend to happen, it's also one that takes a long time to realize. So,
So I know we've covered a lot of different ground.
yeah,
I guess I want to kind of, sort of look at the big picture, summing up a little bit some of the different, nuances that we touched on. If you had to give advice to, a global payroll leader based on, all the experience that you've had managing transformation projects, what would you tell them? You need to particularly pay attention to when they're setting out on a transformation project.
yeah. I think back to that, to all of the things I've mentioned. Start with the process. Look at the people. Have you got the right people that can then get to where you need to be aspirationally? Guiding principles are always, what is it we're trying to achieve? Again, is it better, not best? I think is a phrase I learned, and really make sure that you're not trying to bite off too much that you can cope with. The risk is real, so making sure that all of those things are also considered and known and documented.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that would probably be set your vision. There's no
I would throw in the point that you made somewhere in between, which really resonated with me. I like that a lot. And if someone asks me what I need to make sure when I try to drive a significant transformation. Quick wins is such a big, right? You gotta have some achievements along the way. If you have a big vision, you're trying to drive change, but it takes too long to get to the first tangible results. I've seen it happen, unfortunately, where all the intentions and the goals that people were trying to get to, they were all sound and made a lot of sense, but somewhere along the way, it just until you had these feelings that yes, we're having some wins, we're making some progress, it just took too long, and then people lose faith, they lose energy. Organization's a bit like a living organism, right? If you don't kind of feed it some success in between, it just grows tired, because it's also hard work, right, to drive a transformation. So if you don't see some interim, you can't celebrate some interim success events, I think it becomes very difficult to sustain that energy in the organization.
Yeah, I agree. The momentum piece is again, the building the momentum. One of the things that always try and do and encourage is that you're reporting out to management, steerco, whatever it is you need to do, and probably on a regular basis in a cadence of once a month. Always try and get something in there that's a big win that you can then demonstrate. So back to the quick wins. What is it that we've done that really has made a bit of an impact? And I think the building blocks is a really good way of saying, like, I need these 5 in place before I can move to the next stage. We've ticked one off every month, or this month we've done 2. As you're right, if you go a quarter without actually achieving one of those milestones, you're probably going to start to get the questions. Well, we're not moving quick enough. Actually, is this actually achievable? Those are, I think, really, really important parts of a decent change model. So
this was very good, very insightful. Lots of rich information that you shared. So thanks a lot for that. Anything before we wrap up? Anything you want to leave people with? Any shout outs? Any recommendations?
I think the standard one, the payrollers, keep up the good work. We all need to be paid, and it's it's a great domain. It's one I'm certainly very passionate about, and keep on trucking.
Absolutely.
So they say.
Yes, for sure. Good. Well, again, Steve, thanks so much for coming on today. It's great having you. That's it for today's episode, everyone. Thanks for following us and watching us. If you like this content and you want to see more, then do check out our library of podcasts. You can find them, as I said, on LinkedIn, on LinkedIn page, on our YouTube channel, as well as on the podcast sites. And please check in again for the next episode. So thank you so much, and have a great day.